Hey everyone, my name is Pat, and I want to welcome you to episode 1 of the Kinky Christian podcast. Now, I know what you're thinking, Kinky Christian, right? Doesn't make sense. Well, in a roundabout way, it kind of does. And that's kind of the point of the podcast is we are going to explore what it means to be a Christian and to be kinky. So I want to kind of give you guys a little rundown of what brought me to this point in the first place, to share with you guys my experiences and my beliefs. And what I found as I was maturing, I guess you can call it, and going through life was that I wanted something deep to believe in, and I found that in God. But I also had these desires for sex. Growing up in church, it was kind of weird because they kind of avoided sex altogether. It seemed to be more like a taboo. They acknowledged that we had it. They acknowledged that it was necessary, but it was kind of pushed under the rug when you wanted to talk seriously about it. They would deal with, reproduction, the aspect of it, and they would also deal with like infidelity in a marriage. But I never went to church and saw a sermon on sex. So that prompted me to dig into it on my own. And what I discovered as I was digging was really eye-opening for me. So after years and years of tossing this around and making adjustments in my own life, I realized there's probably other people out there that have gone through the same thing that I went through and am still going through. And I thought this would be a great way to open up a dialogue and have some conversation about sex and God and what it really is about, and explore that. Now, I'm not trying to down church or religion or anything like that. I'm not trying to say that church is bad for not openly talking about sex. And maybe you go to a church that does, and I hope that it works and that you get something out of that. However, my experience has been the opposite of that. There's just not a lot of talk about sex. So I'd like to kind of set a few boundaries as we move forward in this. And I'm not here, I want everyone to know who's watching, that I'm not here to try to convict anyone of anything or convince you that my way is the right way. I don't want to be confrontational, and I don't like conflict at all. And I don't want to cause controversy. I know sex can be very controversial, not just in the church, in religion, but in general. Sex really can be controversial. So I'm not here for any of that. I'm here to just kind of open a dialogue, have some good conversation, just share my life and my experience with anyone who wants to listen, and maybe, have some community, create a community of understanding and see where we go with that. I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination on any of this. I'm not like Harvard educated. I'm not a theologian. I'm not some high member in the kinky community. I hold no degrees. So just take what I say with with a grain of salt and understand that everything I say is just my opinion. It's my experiences. It's just me sharing my life with you in the hopes that maybe somebody somewhere will get something out of it. So as I said, going to church, there really wasn't a lot of discussion on sex. There's a lot of what you should do, or sorry, what you shouldn't do, and a lot of what you can't do, and a lot of what's a sin and what God doesn't like. But there really wasn't a lot of what you can do and what you should do and what God wants us to do. So I began digging into that on my own in an effort to find out what God really has to say about sex. And I was very surprised by what I found. Again, I'm not a theologian. I'm not a Bible expert. And I can't sit here and quote the verses to you and tell you what's right and wrong. But what I can tell you is that God created sex for us to enjoy. In the beginning, when he gives the law, he is very specific about what we shouldn't do. I mean, very specific. And I highly recommend that you go back and read that, where God gives the 10 Commandments and the law after that. And after that, he doesn't really touch on it a whole lot. But we also get to what's called the Song of Solomon. And that is basically a love letter that Solomon writes. And it is very explicit. So that let me know that God is okay with sex, and he wants us to have sex and enjoy sex within the parameters that he set. Given that, I was always puzzled why church didn't really touch on that. Why it still felt like a taboo subject anytime you approach it with someone from church, at least in my experience. So through the digging, through the research, I ended up with my wife, and I've been with my wife for 33 years, but we ended up on this journey together to discover our sexuality with each other. And what we discovered was we liked kinky sex. God is not against kinky sex at all. Within the marriage, God told us to have sex. If you want to use vibrators within the marriage, God's okay with that. If you want to hang your wife from the ceiling and spin her around, God's okay with that. There's not much that God was against as long as it was within the marriage boundaries. And the church kind of avoids all that. They tend to, at least in my experience, again, this is all just my experience, they tend to frown upon things that aren't traditional or things that they call kinky. And that to me just doesn't make sense. You know how kids are. The more you tell them no and that they shouldn't do something, the more they want to do it. And then because you don't educate them on it, they usually do it wrong and end up hurting themselves. And I think that as a group, that Christians are hurting ourselves sexually by not openly discussing the ins and outs of what God says about sex. So anyway, to kind of wrap this up, this podcast is going to be as diverse as I can make it. It's going to be as open as I can be, open and honest. It's going to be a little awkward at first because this is new to me and I've never done this. So just bear with me. Hopefully, I get better as it goes. But it's going to be welcoming. It's going to be, I want it to be conversation starters. And I'm going to do my best to dig in and get facts and share what I learn. I'm hoping that maybe as time goes on, I can get some guests in here to speak on their expertise. But we'll see how that goes. Right now, you're stuck with me. So, thank you again for joining me. If you would like to email me with questions or comments, I am more than open to that. I'll try to answer them if I get questions, discuss topics you bring up. My email address is thekinkychristianpodcast@gmail.com. So just remember, thekinkychristianpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, send me comments. Do you like me? Do you hate me? If you hate me, try to keep it positive so you don't hurt my feelings too bad. I'm kind of sensitive. So yeah, let's do that. And I hope you join me for the next episode where we are going to dig into what is kinky. So until next time, God bless and stay safe.